Hello and welcome to the Revanchist podcast with myself, Teutowhnic, Jacob, whatever. Yeah.
Screwed up right from the start.
That really fell
Right
off, didn't
off
it?
Dun, 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 dun.
Slight-
Welcome to the show, everybody.
Slightly more
I
enthusiastically.
can't wait to listen to that. I can't wait to listen to that again.
Oh, keep it in, it's golden.
Yeah, slightly more enthusiastically, we also have Connor with us, and
Hello, everybody.
Ben.
Good evening.
Good evening. Right,
Okay.
what are we going to be discussing today?
Pesky Ruskies. The pesky Ruskies at it again.
Ah, yes, the Russians.
So we start off. This is an article by The Guardian. Obviously regarding the recent death, the poisoning of Sergei Skripal. Skripal?
Skriptinelli.
Skripal, is it? I can't
I'm joking,
pronounce it.
Skriptinelli.
Obviously he was poisoned by a chemical weapon. The UK has accused Russia of involvement, given that he was, I believe, wasn't he a spy against the Russians, or what was his role
For
again?
Russians, I believe.
I think he deserted, though. There was something that...
Yeah, he did. Yeah. I think he was affected to UK in it. But this was
He was
years
a
ago,
defect-
isn't it?
Yeah, this was... But it certainly
Oh.
isn't the first time that they actually... he was a former Russian military intelligence officer who acted as a double agent for the UK's intelligence services. So, he was a traitor in their eyes, basically. It isn't the first time. There was an incident, obviously, a couple of years back where a nerve agent was used that killed someone with radiation. I don't know if you guys actually remember
Yeah,
the
of course.
case.
Yeah, he was putting his cup of tea on it.
Yep.
Yeah, that was really fun.
Utterly horrific. Of course, the Russians have denied everything, but this is the latest on the story, as Britain has demanded an apology. So, do
Should
you want
we
to
start
read
by
it?
asking whether we think it's the Russians or not?
What's your thoughts? You go first, because I've spoken a little bit.
Look, I mean, I'm gonna. Yeah, I think it was the Russians, but I don't know, mine, because the only reason I could think it would be them, because surely the Russians knew that we'd know it was them straight away. It's a Russian no nerve agent. Obviously, we have the technology to find out what it was very quickly. It was an ex-Russian spy. Like, everything points to Russia. And then you're just thinking, like, that's way too obvious. But then you can also think, are they just testing the water to see what they can get away with?
There is actually a chemical in Salisbury where he died, the person, that produces the same chemical. And the issue is, I think the issue is that with Russia, obviously, some basic deductions we can figure out. They have the most motive to commit the crime, obviously, and it's not exactly out of character.
No, it's not.
Know. But
So
on the other hand,
Corbyn's basically making out it's not the Russians.
I wouldn't say it's not.
Saving face for them.
It most likely
bitch, that's why.
is. It most likely is the Russians, but on the other hand, it is a bit assumptuous.
He loves
as
the
well.
Russians, though. He does. That's why.
I don't.
I've seen that he was working for him in the 80s and whatnot. I wouldn't be surprised.
He
And
was.
do you know what? And the supporters wouldn't care. I asked my dad this because my dad's a fucking Corbyn fan, and he don't believe it. But I said, if it was true, would you care? And he's like, no. But like, if the equivalent of, like, I don't know, come out Trump was funding the Nazis, I probably wouldn't like him.
He did.
I shouldn't have used the word probably there.
Yeah.
I wouldn't like
Corbyn. He worked with a.
It's
He
not
worked with a
confirmed.
socialist group, didn't he? Who was?
I don't
He
know.
did work with a socialist group.
We better not
From
get
what
on
I
to
remember.
Corbyn's politics anyway, but
No, I'm trying not to too much, but I think was it socialist or communist that he worked
same
with?
shit, same shit, different day. Like, but
Mm,
I think it's definitely
That's
important to
debatable.
note that, like,
but yeah.
there's a big political figure at the moment coming out saying, you know, maybe it's not the Russians. Not outright saying it's not, but even to just bring it up, because you've got the Foreign Secretary and the Prime Minister both just saying, well, yeah, it is. So
they've been calling like wolf on the Russians for so long now that it's just become kind of commonplace. But I feel that once there is actually an actual, event such as this where it might possibly be the Russians and it's, a bit of a big deal, then I think it's going to be much more cause for concern.
Imagine that police officer died. Imagine they killed a British police officer on British soil. Surely that's a declaration of war, that is.
It certainly violates any international agreements. Yeah. It's illegal entirely.
I mean, no, imagine that though. Imagine that police officer died. Fucking hell. It'd be much worse than what's happening now.
The thing is that with Russia, they have plausible deniability because there isn't a direct line of evidence that's convicting them here. We just have basic deductions that are saying, look, more than likely it is them.
No, they use that nerve agent as well, don't they? That's a Russian nerve agent. That's why.
So I think it's fair to speculate they did it. It's not exactly like they're the most trustworthy on these matters. Is
it fair to say that we can separate Russians as in the Russian government and just a Russian person who just
Well, obviously,
obviously.
Yeah. I don't think it was some bum from Siberia that killed him, do I? I think it was the Russian government.
Well,
on the other hand, we are supposed to operate on innocent until proven guilty. There is that, I think, as a factor to consider. But I do think the evidence so far sort of points towards it being Russian. Anyway, who wants to read the article?
I'll go for it. Okay, so the Kremlin has insisted the UK must prove Russia's role in the poisoning of a former spy or apologise, as the EU called on Moscow to provide full and complete disclosure of its Novichok programme to international experts. I'll try my best there. The demands for proof came as a team of international experts began a visit to Porton Down in Wiltshire on Monday to assess the nerve agent used to poison Sergei Skripal and his daughter. Experts from the Organisation for the Prohibition of Chemical Weapons were invited to the UK to verify the nerve agent, but it will take at least 2 weeks before they have results. During a meeting of 28 European foreign ministers in Brussels, the EU issued a statement expressing the unqualified solidarity with the UK. But they stopped short of threatening new sanctions against Russia and avoided pinning the blame on the Kremlin. The bloc said it took extremely seriously the UK's government's assessment that it was highly likely that Russia was responsible. This did not go as far as an earlier joint statement by France, Germany, the US and the UK, which concluded it was highly likely that Russia was responsible for the attack. The EU called on Russia to address urgently the questions raised by the UK and the international community and to provide immediate, full and complete disclosure of its Novichok programme to the OPCW. The use of chemical weapons by anyone under any circumstances is completely unacceptable and constitutes a security threat to us all. The EU statement came as Russia demanded proof it was behind the Salisbury attack. Sooner or later, these unsubstantiated allegations will have to be answered for, either backed up with the appropriate evidence or apologised for, Vladimir Putin's spokesman said on Monday. Boris Johnson welcomed the EU's unqualified solidarity, having condemned Moscow's increasingly absurd denials, citing its contradictory claims that Russian production of Novichok. What people can see is that this is a classic Russian strategy of trying to conceal the needle of truth in a haystack of lies. And man, that sentence there is just like, is just blaming the Russians and just like it.
I think there's a point though to it, isn't there? There is a point that
classic Russian strategy.
It is a Russian strategy to attack and then conceal, alter the facts, and that's been the case really since World War II. So it really isn't out of character. It's not. If Jamaica was accused, no one would believe it.
Classic Jamaicans.
No one would believe it. But it's Russia, it's tactics they've employed before. And it's hard to see how they're getting offended from it. It's fairly obvious that people are going to draw the conclusion it's them.
You could say it's almost too obviously Russia, though. Don't get me wrong, I think it's Russia, but it's just like, how stupid can they be? We're obviously going to find out. Like, what a dumb thing. But as I say, unless they're just thinking, well, we can get away with anything, we'll test the waters.
Yeah.
It seems very much, I imagine, it's very much just a sense of arrogance that they can use plausible deniability and talk their way out of anything.
Do you think they would do this sort of thing in the US?
Yes. I reckon there's bullshit. There's obviously bullshit stories and things and plausible deniability going to be used. I think with Russia, though, it's so... the difference is, I think, with Russia here is that they've caught national headlines. And the last thing you want to do when you want to commit crimes and brush them under the rug is end up on the front page of every national newspaper. I'm
not sure how much they care about it being brushed under the rug.
I think on a national stage, there is some leverage at the moment. They're concerned about the football. Obviously, there's issues economically.
Cup, yeah.
Didn't they lose? Didn't they lose it last time? The Olympics? Didn't they lose something like?
They're not allowed in the Russian Olympics.
The Russian Olympics.
They weren't allowed to compete in the Winter Olympics. Every athlete from Russia was just they didn't compete under the Russian flag, just the Olympic one. And instead of saying Russian athlete, they were athletes from Russia. And there's talk of them being banned from all future Olympics, both winter and summer.
And that was due to so many athletes.
It was state-sponsored doping, yeah.
Doping. I mean, that
I'm not sure if it was actually gear, but it was doping for sure.
Sure. I mean, that in itself, the fact so many of these athletes, doesn't that kind of clue into the mindset, the Russian mindset?
Yeah. I mean, that's some fucking Cold War shit. Why do they care that much about fucking how well their athletes do in the Winter Olympics?
It is. The Russians say, like, there's a defense. They're like America. They're just trying to drag on the Cold War. They're trying to bring it back. But you're not helping the situation. If one or two of the athletes were found doping, all right, whatever. There's always someone who's trying to get away with it doping. But the fact so many of them were caught just says that it's the standard.
The whistleblower said it's state-sponsored, isn't it? So
exactly. I mean, that in itself, they're not helping.
It's weird how much involvement the government even have in athletics.
Yeah, I mean,
it's weird that is. Like, obviously, athletes over here are funded and stuff, but like, often have personal coaches. Like, it's just all government run there. It's weird.
They act incredibly surprised. They've built a massive cult of personality around Putin. What's the point of their elections as well? What an absolute fucking joke.
I got an accumulator I have on Putin to lose.
Even
Putin to lose and Leicester to win the league 2016.
Sure. They've barred his only actual rival from being able to compete. The only one who actually would stand any semblance of a chance is not allowed to run along, against him. Even if he lost, you just know whoever was put into power would be a puppet, and he'd still be pulling the strings.
Yeah.
How is it not a dictatorship? How is it not a dictatorship? They claim it isn't, but how isn't it?
Putin's been there long past his supposed term. It's been changed the constitution.
It's because they've built up this thing since the fall of the Berlin Wall. They've needed, the strong leader, and he is Putin.
Well, I saw a thing recently. It was after the Berlin Wall. They turned quite free market. And they sold a lot of the public-owned goods very, very cheap, and a lot of men made money. One being Roman Abramovich, a lot of money. And then the public become really resentful of these businessmen who'd made so much and become so powerful. So then Putin came in and basically put all of them in jail.
It's the perestroika.
Except Roman Abramovich, who he then sold all their businesses to, so he made even more money. It's absolute genius. But, I mean, it's all corrupt, isn't it?
It's not. It certainly doesn't ring the bells of democracy. It's not. I'm surprised he hasn't re-announced, and the USSR has returned.
Yeah, change the flag.
Revenge of the Communists, Part 2.
How communist do you think he is?
He cried when the USSR fell. I think I know that he cried when he saw like the old communist music. He gets really emotional. He absolutely.
Maybe he's a good actor. I reckon he don't really care about political belief. I reckon he's not too interested. I reckon he's definitely a socialist, but I reckon he's not like. I reckon he's not that bothered. I reckon he's more just about power.
Soon to announce himself the new Tsar.
I mean, as I say, like, he's really, really good friends with Abramovich. A communist wouldn't be.
They're kind of mutually exclusive, I think.
What, to be friends with some massive business tycoon that's made his money through oil? Why would a communist like that?
Nah, I mean, communism isn't, I think, the vast majority. It's not the same anymore. Even in, like, China, people say China's communist. Whenever I hear that, people like, China is the one state, communism, and it just worked. And it's like, no, it didn't. It's a pseudo mixture of capitalism and communism. Their economics are actually a lot more capitalistic.
For me, it can't. Yeah, it can't be communist anyway. Like, communism's an absolute at the end of the day. Like, you can't be a bit communist. You're communist or you're not.
They've definitely altered their philosophies since the days of Mao Zedong. They're very much politically communist in control, but economically, they've definitely opened up to make profit. Obviously, everything's made in China.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's I think.
I wonder if that's racist.
Well, everything being made in China.
Well, you saying that, because not everything is.
Typical Chinese making everything.
Oh, okay.
Coming over here, making
we'll
our
say
toilet paper.
90% of everything is made in China.
So it's still an assumption. So.
Oh, okay.
Carry on.
So I don't know whether that's about it on Russia. I don't think there's much else. I mean, they probably did do it.
We all agree it was the Russians, right? We all know it was the Russians.
I think, yeah, it was 90% chance the Russians. More than likely.
I wonder how many classic uni communists think it's not the Russians.
Or
do you reckon these guys like Putin? Surely they don't. Do the classic uni communists like the Russians then?
I don't know, because he's not exactly, Russia isn't.
SJW, is he?
It's not like Lenin walking down the street.
Yeah, there's certainly like a uchronic kind of call back to the Leninists and the Bolsheviks and that kind of thing. There's a lot more of an aura about that than there is of Stalin, I feel, and the current Russian system.
I mean, they invoke a lot more like Mao Zedong, a little bit, Stalin. No, a little Stalin, but mostly they go for
mostly Lenin.
Lenin, yeah.
Lenin and Marx, isn't it?
Lenin and Marx, yeah. A love of Lenin and Marx. Okay. But that's about it, I think, with this. I ain't got much else to add. Anyone else?
Nah.
Okay, should we move on to the next topic of discussion?
Yeah, what is it?
Okay, we're looking at Antifa.
Yes, the Antifa vid.
Everyone's favourite fascists in disguise. So let's give it a watch. If it loads.
Fear is a part of our tactics. We do want Nazis to be afraid to organize in public. It's our job to go out there and say, no, we're not going to allow you to spread these ideas. Politically, I'm an anarcho-communist and I'm an anti-fascist, and right now I'm focusing a lot on that anti-fascism. So what I'm doing here is mixing half part water and half part liquid antacid. It makes something called LAW, or liquid antacid and water. You use it in response to pepper spray. We get a lot of accusations that we're doing this for kicks, that we're doing this because we're violent teens who just want to see violence happen. Seeing the state of the world and seeing the news and seeing what's going on, seeing how much danger people were in, made me want to get involved.
So, what was your thoughts? What are your thoughts on this Antifa then? What do you think? You start then, Ben. What do you think?
Asking me?
Yeah, you.
Well, I clearly don't like Antifa. Don't know where to start, really. I think nothing of them.
I'll start. I'll say this, is that I think,
I liked your point about comparing them to the Nazi using scare tactics about the communists.
I think at their most basic, I'll say my little bit. Would you prefer that, and then you can discuss?
Go ahead. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah. I think at their core, and this is, I suppose, I have a degree of sympathy in the sense that I can understand at a very, very simple level, Nazis are bad. We don't like Nazis. We want to get rid of Nazis. That's, at its most basic, when you just think of it at that level, I think, okay, fine. That's, anyone should will say.
It's simply the means of which they go about it.
I think it's not just that.
It's non-Nazis, though, is it? The non-Nazis, the people they're going after.
As I said, I think at its most basic, I can emphasize with that. And I think a lot of this stuff, even though the speaker in this vid is like, oh, we're just violent teens. I don't think they're violent teens so much as just naive teens. Just kids who think that clearly, this is how things should be done.
Their morals are all over the place.
Yes.
It seems...
They think they're doing the right thing, to be fair, but so do jihadists, so it don't really give me any sympathy for them. It doesn't interest me at all.
There's an old expression, everyone's the hero of their own story. Everyone thinks what they're doing is right, and they will use it to justify whatever horrible action they take.
Yeah.
Because, the ends justify the means in this
But
philosophy.
I really think these guys sleep well at night thinking they're actual heroes.
Yes. There's definitely the throwback. He mentions he's an anarcho-communist, and those violent sort of an anarchist and a communist. Those things don't really gel well together. Communists, they have absolute iron grip control.
Does he just want? I know. What does he even want? Just a fucking wasteland where no one's got fucking anything. Is that what he wants?
How can you be, just as a side point, how can you be an anarcho-communist? Those two things are not the same. And any way, communism has a iron fucking grip. If you was to look, just as an example, this is in China, they passed with Mao Zedong one of these policies of his, I think it was called the Great Leap Forward, and they were pushing for all these technological advancements very quickly to modernize. And it caused mass starvation, millions were starving. And one of the villages, because it was so bad, parents were literally eating their children. And this village, from what I remember, was basically taped off, and they just said, we're going to let everyone die in there. And it was decided that would be the course of action. And I think that really cements the iron fist that communism can have. You only need to look at things like Stalin's purge. So to be an anarchist and a communist...
Oh, but that wasn't real communism, though.
Oh, no, it's never real. It's never real communism. It's never real. That's an old little statement. It's always, oh, they never did it right. I mean, how many times can someone get it wrong before you say maybe the system's fundamentally just fucking
Yeah.
broke at its core?
It simply cannot work and is destined to go down that same path.
The only ones who have managed to make it tolerable are people who have altered it. It's not pure communism anymore. Pure communism is not proven to work. It's always twisted and altered in ways like China's done it now.
Yeah.
It's not pure communism.
So kind of go back to the Marxist groundwork and try rework it.
But yeah, that's just a little point. You know, these people who talk about like, I'm an anarchist communist. An anarchist believes in like no control, no anything. You know,
complete
it's
freedom.
so juxtaposed. It's so juxtaposed. How can you be the one and the other?
Yeah.
Interesting,
But whatever.
isn't it? Can there be that much freedom? It no longer becomes freedom because you have no way to be free. Like there's without law, can you be free? Quite philosophical, that isn't it? You see what I mean? If someone can just kill you with like
there's
no problems at all.
There's no parameters of which it's being measured up to in order to consider it freedom. If you know what I mean?
Yeah, well, exactly. Yeah.
I always wonder with this anarcho-communist shit. We've moved slightly away, but it does seem to be a philosophy that pops up with Antifa. And when they talk about, fine, you want the Nazis gone, but this anarcho-communist, what's the kind of ideal world you're picturing where there's no real government, I assume, or
I don't know. I mean, I think, but then they love Corbyn, don't they? So I think really that they just say that. They try to seem cool.
I bet the future, if they had their way, would turn into some Mad Max wasteland. And you go out the door, Ben, you just open the door, there's some fucking guy with a bucket on his head holding a spear and a leather harness. Two men enter, one man leave.
I think that's what they're looking for. It must be.
I've like for my course in university, like part of the academia is looking at Marxist theory, and part of the one of the core fundamental principles in order to try and convince people in order to become Marxist and to get a Marxist society is the theory of praxis. So carrying out the actions that you believe in and influencing people around you to do the same. So it's kind of it's kind of, if enough people believe what we believe, then the rule will become what everyone believes. And it's almost like a circle, if you know what I mean. It just goes round and round.
I can think of some guys in Germany who had a similar idea. About, getting
it's almost democratic ruling, to be honest, though, because if 80% of the population are Marxist, then automatically there's a majority Marxist. Therefore, they can shape the worldview of their country as a Marxist country.
And if there was 80% of Nazis in the world as the whole population, they could shape the whole world in their image.
Yeah, and
I mean, it's irrelevant to. I mean, if you have if everyone believes your opinion, of course you can shape the world your way.
Yeah.
You could put anyone
in
any group in there.
It is a pointless thing to say, because over 80, it's hard to get something 80% of people agree on, other than the obvious, like murder's bad. Do you know what I mean? Like,
if
a political idea to get 80% of people in a country saying it.
If I got 90% of people to agree murder is acceptable, of course it would pass and it would become acceptable.
Therein is the theory of praxis.
But anyway,
the point is, it never would. So
no, because I think it's fatally flawed as a system, and the problems eventually will, start to appear with allowing murder. Obviously, like my scenario, or in anarcho-communist. I don't even know how this so bizarrely juxtaposed. But anyway, God, I've gone off. We've gone off on a tangent.
No, it's all similar.
How is wealth going to be redistributed if there's no government?
Yeah, it's just winner takes all.
That man in the bucket.
It would become really right wing because it'd be the survival of the fittest, strongest survives.
I reckon it would go the way of tribes. It would go the way of actual tribes gathering resources.
Yeah, so then it would become right wing, wouldn't it?
And then again, we come back to having a governmental system, a hierarchy.
Yeah, because one tribe would win and eventually be a
just
government.
Just one of the warlords comes out wearing a yellow rubber ducky and a golf club, and is like, "The oil is mine," and he charges at the petrol station. But
That's your anarchist future.
that's
A guy with a rubber duck. Okay.
And a golf club. He's armed,
Aye.
armed and dangerous.
So anyway, we were talking about
golf clubs.
we were talking about
I know.
we were talking about Antifa. So we were talking about the mindset of university
Yeah.
students. It seems to be the majority of them are university students.
Yeah, fucking idiots, isn't he?
Yeah, us university students. Me and Connor.
Bunch of fucking idiots.
But as for the point I was making, is that the language they use and the tactics they employ, I don't think they see the irony in it. Because if you replace their language, he even says, fear tactics are a part of our plan. We want the enemy to be afraid. We want them to know. Those are exactly
Stupid,
the
that
same
is.
things
The funny thing is,
Nazis were saying.
the people that they're clashing with are most of the time moderate fucking conservatives. I mean, they turned out to shut down Jacob Rees-Mogg, for fuck's sake. Like, what a joke. Like, how can they call him a Nazi? But either way, I think if it was actual Nazis, I don't think they'd get fucking battered.
Yeah.
I'm not
Like, as if fucking KKK are scared of a bunch of uni boys smoking weed.
If Hitler's SS and SA officers came back through a time portal and met Antifa, Antifa would get the
whooped.
shit
They
kicked
would
out
get
of them.
whooped, Yeah.
They would get crushed.
They'll get their ass handed to them,
Because, but, I mean, it's ironic they use this language and they say we're against fascism, we're against all these things, but the things they say and the tactics they're employing are exactly the same things that the Nazis were saying and doing against the communists.
Can be categorized by their authoritarian nature.
Because they were saying we need to use fear tactics, we need to stop the communists, we'll do whatever we can, they need to be afraid. What's the difference?
Yeah.
What is the difference? And I find it ironic. It reminds me of a quote by Nietzsche. And it's Friedrich Nietzsche. I can't pronounce his name ever.
Nietzsche.
But
It's just
Nietzsche.
a ch on the end.
Yes. Yeah.
What's that?
Go away. I have visitors. All right, continue.
Be careful how you fight monsters, else you may become a monster. That very much springs to mind, I think, with Antifa. But I mean, at their philosophical level, I find them appallingly, contradictory. But how much of a real threat are they? How much of a serious threat?
Massive, I reckon.
Really?
Yeah.
Because a part of me just thinks this is just a bunch of school kids, kids dreaming high.
They're so entitled, aren't they? They're such they're usually middle class. Always middle class.
Oh yeah, they're entitled, and obviously they're flawed at a basic philosophical level. But I don't think at least, I remember before this there was the whole anonymous movement, and back when I was when I was a bit more edgy, when I was young, I was like, yeah, anonymous, when I was like, go you guys, you're pretty cool. But now, is this not just, the modern day anonymous? Is this?
Yeah, I think there's definitely parallels between them.
Will they not just fizzle out, do you think?
Nah, it's too big. It's too big. I mean, literally, it's mainstream now. It's too mainstream. I'd say for under 25s in the UK, more people are Antifa than just normal conservatives.
The thing is, though, they haven't got a real enemy. Not really. Who are they?
Everyone is not them.
I mean, they're fighting. It's not like actual Nazis are running down the street. They fight at best.
That's what they think.
At best,
They see people like Rees-Mogg as Nazis.
The thing is, though, I don't actually think have they actually bothered to fight like or meet neo-Nazis? I think they have, and they had a massive
Which ones?
role.
Oh.
Yeah, there's hundreds of groups of neo-Nazis, hundreds of variant groups at this point as well.
Well, Charlottesville's that bit basically, isn't it?
Yeah.
And one of
Yeah.
them, an Antifa ended up dying from. One Antifa member died from it, isn't it? I'm not
The
sure
one-
if she's Antifa. I might be wrong there, but fucking a
The
left-wing person died.
The irony is that there isn't some united neo-Nazi front. The neo-Nazis themselves are fighting each other. They all have vastly different theories on how to deal with the situation, on their own ideologies. There are some who have, I can't remember. There's the Aryan Brotherhood is vastly different from, say, some punk who's like, I hate black people. It's a vastly different sort of.
The neo-Nazis hate the KKK, don't they? Do you know that?
I think there's an ideological split between different sectors. I don't, but I mean, that's the thing. Who are they fighting? And it just seems to me like they want to make a scene, they want to make a shout. I just think they're a bunch of kids. I think their philosophy's fatally flawed, but I think they'll fizzle out in the end. I remember when, Anonymous in our day was massive, and when that was all over the news, and that was mainstream, Fox and CNN and even BBC were talking about it all, and, I think it'll go out.
They weren't as big as Antifa.
No, they're probably a
They're
bit bigger,
huge.
but
But everyone has sympathies with Antifa, though.
Yeah, I know what you mean.
Even mainstream media
Yeah, because by
not supporting them, but sympathising.
by definition, everyone should be against Nazis, right? But it's just the tactics that are associated.
Yeah, they've
with it.
but they've used the wrong word for it too. They're not anti-fascist.
I don't think
of
they.
course, yeah.
I
yeah.
think
that just...
I think they, they themselves are employing fascist tactics. I don't think, they're very confused ideology. They're a very.
Do you reckon the
They're
Antifa
not-
themselves will grow out of it?
I imagine, I think so. I think the movement will fizzle out.
That's just an age
I
thing
think.
as well. But
Because-
there's always going to be people to replace them, right? Because young people are more liberal, older people become more conservative as they age, and it's just a continuous cycle,
Because in the end,
Weird to think someone from Antifa could actually just come to a point of realization in their life, though.
Yeah.
They're just
Because
losers.
I think-
Maybe when they get a job and start understanding things.
because
I'd say
now,
99.9% of them are middle-class entitled cunts who've never worked a day in their life.
see,
That's what I think about Antifa when you
At the
when you ask me
moment-
about it. That's what I think.
at the moment they're riding high on, they're talking about our Charlottesville, and they'll mention, they're back, and they've antagonized the non-existent neo-Nazis who, they weren't
Yeah.
there. They've just given them publicity. They weren't.
Oh, they've
they
definitely
haven't-
helped grow the alt-right. There's no doubt
They
about it.
have.
Absolutely.
They've
Absolutely.
Antifa have single-handedly grown the alt-right, so fair play to them for that. Who do you prefer, alt-right or anti? I prefer alt-right. At least alt-right aren't violent.
Ideology.
Ideologically.
I can't even I can't say the word now. Ideologically, I don't like either side.
agree. It's
I don't
just-
like. I mean, the thing is,
They're both
the thing is
collectivist
about
ideologies.
yeah,
They're just the same, same coin, opposite sides.
yeah. I think there's fascist tactics employed on both sides. Obviously, I think the right, are playing to the sympathy a little bit now, and they're being like, "Look, we're being censored. Look at this."
Yeah, I know,
But I do think, even though they may play to the sympathies, and they may get a little, because okay, they should still have the right to say their views. Their views are still at their core, vile, in the sense of like the Jews are, Hitler is right and all this.
Yeah, I still find it mad to this day that people are like hate the Jews and shit. It's fucking weird, that is.
Yeah, they haven't
Really
done,
weird.
that, they haven't done that much wrong, I don't think.
Well, the odd thing, like.
Funded wars.
But that's that pretty much.
The left hate Jews these days, though, don't they?
Yeah, it's kind of switched around, hasn't it?
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
even like That is weird. That is like all Corbyn fans.
Yeah, there is anti-Semitism in the Labour Party.
Maybe not all the Corbyn fans. Oh well, fuck him. So I'm not
They
interested.
do. There is a thing about Rothschild and all this they bring up, and
Yeah, it's
this
because
global
they hate capitalists, don't
conspiracy.
they?
Yeah,
left-wingers
and Jews are the most one of the most successful ethnic groups. They have the highest average IQ. They're obviously going to be the most successful in terms of business.
I find it strange if they think
a lot of directors, isn't they? Hollywood directors are Jewish.
Yeah.
I mean, the Jewish community has been smart with its money. It has learned, if you are a capitalist, I don't see how you could criticize the Jewish people for being good at making money as a community.
Yeah, but it's funny because the right we're talking about, like the old right, they're not capitalist. They're socialist, and just like Antifa, national socialists. They're not capitalist.
That varies from person to person, I think, because alt-right is determined by their belief in white ethnicity.
No, it is. Even Richard Spencer himself, he doesn't really care about economics. He's not interested in it.
It's just self-preservation at the end.
But is National Socialism? I mean, Hitler called his party the National Socialist Workers' Party.
Is that a coincidence?
But I mean, was there really any? There wasn't really any socialism in Hitler's sort of party ideology, was there? It was just the name.
The old, not real socialism, eh?
Well, was it? I mean, what was socialist in? I mean, it was socialist in the sense that he saw what they were doing was best for the working man, but it wasn't traditional sort of, socialism as we would think of it, I think.
Yes, I think just define it by the totalitarian nature of it more so than the economic side of it.
Yeah.
It's not left or right, it's just totalitarian. It's up and down.
Anyway, let's move on to the other thing So we're looking at this time Tommy Robbins, and I take it you'll want to talk a little bit about this.
Yeah, this is kind of Ben's avenue, but
I'm
willing to chip in as well. Right.
Is that some sort of video, isn't it?
Yeah, gonna watch
it's the Tommy Robinson.
Move back! No!
So that vid showed Abdul Hamid. This is from Tommy Robinson. Abdul Hamid and his extremist followers assaulting people with weapons today in front of the police. Tommy claims that one of them was arrested, but the real telling thing is to watch the police, and they did not put a hand on the Muslim protesters. Instead, manhandled the ones who were attacked.
The police are definitely biased. As we've seen with all these grooming gangs, the police won't touch Muslims, but they're happy to do anything to white people, especially white males.
There's certainly, I mean, what are your with this whole affair? Then is he just an extremist, or do you think he's part of something wider?
Ooh, Tommy Robinson?
No, this guy Abdul.
Oh, he's just fucking idiot. No,
I mean, obviously he's, there's an extreme aggression there. What do you think of Tommy's point about the police? Do you think it is because I'm thinking that maybe because we're in such a sensitive time at the moment, do you think police officers are nervous about putting their hands on a Muslim person?
Yeah, 100%.
In case. Because I think that obviously,
I know that guy hit people with sticks. I don't even know him. He might not even be extremist. I don't know his I don't know his fucking views on Islam, do I? But he's obviously a violent man. I've never heard of the bloke, to be honest.
So, with Tommy's, do you think, obviously, Tommy, is there an issue in your mind? You know, obviously, I'm just, because you obviously watch him a lot more than me and Jacob obviously do.
I watch him a fair
I don't watch him too much, obviously. I hear bits and bobs. You know, what's your thoughts on his integrity? Because a lot of people obviously say that, you know, he's an agitator himself.
There's definitely times me and Tilly have questioned him.
I think you identify more with him than I do.
Yeah, do you know what? Like, there's been times where he's been on the money, times where, like, when he wanted, like, when he was slagging off Celtic fans, was it?
Oh yeah.
It didn't make any sense. He met Imam Tawhidi recently. Did you watch that?
I watched some extracts of it, but that
Oh, it was absolutely brilliant.
conversations
And,
like that are what need to be had.
I love Tommy, but I think like Imam Tawhidi is much more important.
Yes.
Yes. And he's just what Imam Tawhidi is saying is what people should listen to. The trouble is, sad to say, Tommy's white and working class, so people aren't interested in what he's got to say.
Yeah.
Plus, he's an ex-football hooligan, so that, like it's just not looking good for him. People aren't going to listen to what he's going to say. He fits the bill. He fits the bill of what people are going to hate. He's angry, late 30s, white male, ex-football hooligan, very working class. Like, if he starts questioning Islam, people are going to start using every word they can think of: racist, bigot, Nazi, whatever. When Imam Tawhidi, a man born in Iran, trained as an imam, starts questioning Islam, that's when it gets important.
Yeah.
So, I like Tommy. I'm not sure how much change he can make, but he's a very important man, and I think he's a good man. But
Yeah.
I mean,
Obviously,
yeah.
obviously, I don't know too much about. I know enough, you know. I know the gist of it, obviously. So my opinion is sort of undecided. On the one hand, you know, people are saying, you know, a little part of me thinks, how much does he distort things? Maybe does he? You know, there is maybe a little. I get a sense that this is a guy maybe who at least knows how to sell a message.
Yeah.
You know, in a way that
Perhaps has his own
is
biases. Yeah.
simple. You know, and able to get a crowd.
No, I don't think so.
I don't think he's necessarily a racist.
Based on being a Muslim.
It's just,
I don't think he's necessarily a racist. I think, though, you know, it's one of those things is that the psychology behind what he does, you know, is it motivated in a way that's 100% seeking the truth? Or is it motivated in a way... Because obviously he has this dislike
I tell you why I like
Islam.
Tommy. Like, Britain's first... They say they want Islam banned, which I find absolutely ridiculous. I think government having the power to ban any idea is
too
immoral,
authoritarian, too much power.
wrong. It's just really bad. No idea should be banned. There's I'm not a Muslim, but there's plenty of ideas worse than Islam. It's still like I don't agree with Islam, as you know, but there's ideas worse. Like paedophilia is an idea, and there's a lot of people that want to make that legal. But I just don't think any idea. You can't have thought crime, can you?
No,
So,
obviously.
But Tommy doesn't say that. Tommy doesn't say Islam should be banned. First and foremost, he wants a reformation, but as him and Imam Tawhidi spoke about, that's never going to happen. And if it does, it'll be 500 years.
I mean, I think the thing about it is...
All he wants is a temporary ban on immigration from the countries that sponsor terrorism and where terrorism is grown.
Until we can sort stuff out.
Until things are sorted out, and one day they will be like in the 1980s when Islamic terror in the UK was there. And if it started, it'll stop. I think there'll always be problems in the Islamic world, and with Islamic extremism. But it doesn't necessarily always have to be in the UK.
Do you obviously think, like, you say that there's going to be no reformation? Now, hear me out.
500 years, maybe.
I don't think that, you know, the religion itself is going to go through some dramatic revision and they're going to change this dogmatic thinking. But, you know, obviously I think that scientifically as a society, isn't that going to slowly intercept and slowly eat away
But well,
at
science has gone
Islam?
backwards in the region. Like I don't know. Like
It
I know
has for
plenty
now.
of. It's
It
weird.
has for now, but I think eventually, assume Islam took over tomorrow. Assume the religion just was everywhere, across, and eventually science, much like Christianity, because remember Christianity at one point had an extreme
Oh,
foothold,
no doubt about it.
and
No doubt about it.
and science ate its way through that. So even though they can be denialistic for now, I mean, Christians were denialistic for an extremely long time. Eventually, the facts will catch up with them. And at the very least, even if they don't outright say it, they're going to start thinking and questioning the validity of what they've been taught and read. So
I think one of the main problems with Islam, though, is first and foremost, you've got the Shia and the Sunni at each other's throats anyway. So, even not even taking the rest of the world and other people into account, like there's the tension between Iran and Saudi Arabia. Like how's that going to get solved? Like that doesn't even,
Simply
no,
something the Western
even-
world can't
even-
get involved in.
like look at how much Protestants and Catholics hated each other in Ireland. How many years ago? Well, 30 years ago, and there wasn't any like scientific denial then. Like there were some fundamental Christians, but there's still going to be beliefs, and there's still going to be that problem just through Shia and Sunnis.
I'm not saying that, I'm saying obviously there's still going to be these political divides and the various factions fighting and, trying to gain power. But I'm just trying to say that, obviously Christianity's foothold was undeniably, attacked and lost to a fair degree, I'd say, by advancements in science, because eventually people will start to question if the text says, this is how you're bound to. And I think even, they can deny a lot of it for now. They can wave it away and say you need to listen. But when there's no enemy to fight anymore, assuming there's no enemy, when they've just got time to think and question and sit down, then, what happens then? What becomes of Islam when they've just got time to think and not be distracted by warfare, these factions?
It's quite interesting that one of the fundamental principles is that if you can't subdue a nation via warfare, like we're talking very old Quranic scripture, is that if you can't subdue the country through war, then it's via immigration. You marry their wives, you have their children. I think that's
what they're doing. Is it?
Well, that's certainly an interpretation, and I'm that's something that we learned in A-level religious studies in Islam. That's not like
Really?
Yeah.
I don't know. It seems too much of something that has to be organised. I don't think all the Muslims are meeting up and being like, right, let's go to the West. Let's have our babies. I don't think that's happening. Like,
It's not.
interesting thought. I'm sure there's some imams out in the East that would claim that's what's happening, but I don't reckon. Like, they come from too many different countries and stuff.
It's not just that. It's it is a very seductive. There is. I think it's more seductive Western lifestyle than say bombed out Syrian.
I can't blame immigrants for wanting to move to the UK or to the West in general. Like, I have to put myself in their shoes. I'd try my best as well.
But I'm also saying, like, how many of these Muslims who come over here really, because there is a few. In fairness, we have to. Would just say, you know what, it's better out here in the West.
No, I think a lot do. I think a lot. I would say our age, but let's say it's weird, right? Because majority of Muslims I know, obviously around my age, and like second generation, so like they were born here, and like and like they're moderate, they're fine, they're normal people, they're normal Muslims, I guess. But then at the same time, majority of the terrorists are born here, so like and around our age. So it's just weird. I mean, it'd be much easier if the terrorists were in their 40s and they were born and grew up in Iran. Like, that'd be much easier to sort of think why it's happening. But for someone in the second generation or third generation here, and about 19 to almost say 18 to 25. That's just really weird. Like it seems to be it's weird, isn't it?
Definitely, you've definitely got a point there. You've definitely, I think, hit something on the head. I think ISIS, the one thing that they have done, like these terrorist organizations, is that they have figured out, the platforms to go for young people on. They have figured out how.
It's weird
to
how
get
young
their
people
message.
represent the most moderate and extreme versions of Islam.
Yeah. I think that in itself is. I think that's interesting. I'm not really sure what to do about that, in my opinion. But it's definitely, it is a real divide. I think there doesn't seem much in between, does there? It does sort of just seem.
Yeah, I agree with you there. It doesn't seem
all
as
we
much
ever
in between.
all we ever hear about is moderate Muslim, or we hear extremist. It not much in between. I think that in itself.
I think it's hard to find an in between there. Because I think if you're gonna be fundamental in any religion, you're gonna subscribe to it. Like you're not gonna believe in Adam and Eve and then not eat fish on Fridays.
Would you consider
if you're gonna be fundamental, you're gonna go all the way in you.
Would you consider us moderate Christians?
Oh fuck me, yeah.
So
ridiculously moderate.
I think.
I don't think.
I think
I wouldn't consider
yourself. Yeah, you're atheist though, anyway. But like me and
I'm
Ben,
not.
so I think the level for what is a moderate Muslim is a very different level to what's a moderate Christian.
Yeah, I'd say that because of the societal expectations, like have eaten away at Christianity. A moderate Christian is, extremely lower standard than a moderate Muslim. A moderate Muslim still goes to the mosque to pray.
Yeah, I've never been to church voluntarily in my entire life, other than things like funerals and that. But but I consider myself Christian, so that so it's weird. But if a Muslim has never been to mosque, I doubt they consider themselves like I've never met a Muslim that's never been to the. I've never met a Muslim who doesn't go mosque.
I've met and heard of ones who I think eat bacon and are drunk.
I've heard of Muslims drinking alcohol, yeah, but never one that doesn't go mosque.
Never one that's not gone mosque, but I've heard of those that have,
But how many Christians should go to church? Fucking regular.
How many?
The boy Tilly, that's about it.
even at university, I don't really.
But,
I just want to come home, yeah.
But yeah, I mean, obviously, I'm an agnostic atheist in my personal belief. So, obviously, but I think there is a different standard, definitely.
Yeah, there is.
Moderate Christian and moderate Muslim. Yeah. But yeah.
Why do you think there's this protection of Islam then? Whereas like you can take the piss out of God and Jesus and even like the Hindu gods and stuff so openly in pop culture, and then like even like Jew jokes are pretty acceptable these days as long as they're not too bad. But like sort of even to like sort of speak bad of Muhammad, like a historical figure, like you're seen as like a Nazi.
My personal opinion, it's a total hypocrisy because I believe you should be able to criticize anyone, anything, I think obviously the way it's happened is that the Muslim community has allied itself to the SJWs heavily.
Somehow, yeah.
So by doing that, even though I find it crazy, I can't think of why any woman, would look at, I think, Christianity and Islam and be like, I 100% support this. I can't think of a reason why any woman would do that.
It's funny, isn't it? Because you saying that now, people would think that was like unbelievably racist. You saying that.
I mean, the Bible outright says, and the Quran, it outright states a woman, her role is to be subservient. She is basically a lesser being to her husband.
Yeah, I find it weird. a quarter of
I
that
find
amount
it
caught.
weird that feminists stand alongside this ideology and be like,
This is the one.
but it's funny where they say like these people have a right to their religion and their voice, but then other groups they say no these ideas who will say the same thing, but they're not under the banner of a religion, and suddenly this group is marginalized, this group is attacked.
Do you want to hear
I find it.
Do you want to hear a Jordan Peterson interpretation of why feminism and Islam are so closely linked?
I would love to.
Go ahead. Go ahead.
Well, he delves into the realm of psychology and
Okay.
Sigmund Freud. So he looks at the idea of feminism, completely rejecting the idea that they need men whatsoever in the third wave sense of the feminist ideology. Yet Islam is the most tyrannical, masculine religion and system of belief that you could, find in the mainstream world, So what he thinks is perhaps that there's an unconscious element where feminists kind of desire that absolute authoritarian, tyrannical masculinity in order to kind of counteract their complete, complete rejection of male social values.
That's I'd say that's an interesting.
It's a big idea, and he doesn't necessarily believe it. He just thinks that it's interesting.
It's interesting, but obviously that would need. I mean, it's very Freudian and needs more evidence, substantial to really.
It's definitely interesting, though, isn't it?
It's definitely
a point to bring up and ponder.
Personally, I think they've allied themselves because they've become aware that they can push their message, this SJW message and agenda, stronger the more.
As well, maybe.
The more factions and groups they have under them, pushing their message, the more mainstream. The more mainstream their ideology becomes. Even though I think that's part of what will be their inevitable downfall because of infighting.
Yeah,
I reckon because they are, at their heart.
I remember watching one.
They're ideologically different.
There's one video with it's like a communist rally or something, and it's all the regular SJW rhetoric, and they're talking about what's it? This one white guy, one white male in the audience, in the crowd with them.
What's he doing there?
What?
Oh, he's on.
All right, yeah.
Fine.
And literally a Latino woman just literally says, at the end of the day, you're still our enemy.
Yeah, I've seen that. But he's part of them, though, isn't it?
Yeah.
Milo
made... argue saying, he's fought for Antifa and all, isn't it?
Yeah.
Do you know what? I've got to say, Milo Yiannopoulos made, I thought, an excellent point. And he basically argued, as I've just made about feminism, he argued, why would any gay man, support a religion like Christianity or Islam when it basically has outright stated
Milo's Christian.
These people should be killed. He is Christian, but he's very heavily. I mean, Christian, again, as I've said, Christianity has been tempered massively. But I think if it was back in its heyday, obviously we're referring to religions that still have the same veracity and same.
The trouble, but these religions were like that because that's what the world was like at the time. So maybe it's just proof that religions don't exist and they're all just lies.
I mean, obviously, you're going more into my sort of realm I think.
I disagree with that.
Yeah, but it's obviously the way the world was at the time.
Yeah, but
that's why they're so like that.
I just think that it's recurrent within humans to have some kind of belief in the supernatural and.
No, I don't mean that.
Sorry,
I mean why? I mean why were they like? Let's just say they're all sexist for now. Why were the mainstream Abrahamic, the three Abrahamic religions? Why were they all sexist upon?
Oh, okay, yeah, it's just a reflection of the culture, yeah.
A reflection of society and the conscious people at the time. Because at the time, you'd be hard pressed to find a woman saying women were better than men in the world. Oh fucking hell! Like, do you know what I mean? Like, women were pretty at the time. So I think when these religions come about, it was just the way people thought. So that's why they were incorporated into the religion.
Yeah.
That was my point. I don't.
But obviously.
Sorry.
I don't think that's why
Obviously,
religion was brought back. Go ahead, sorry.
obviously, though, Christianity has, I think, lost its teeth to a degree. I mean, it's certainly not, when we think Islam, by and large, is still extremely, there's a lot of violence going on, there's a lot of conflict and, word, taken as gospel. Christianity, it hasn't been like that
There's a lot.
for
There's a lot of
fair
fundamental
while.
Christian groups and
Yeah, but
East Africa, isn't it?
even the fundamental Christian groups, it's not that level of they're not going
It's
out
not
like
ISIS.
we
It's not
don't
ISIS.
we need to kill the gays or we need to kill.
I don't know. No, they do that in East Africa,
Yeah, but
but it's not as organized. It's not as big. It's not as
yeah.
wide scale.
So I think
There's always going to be homophobics, but it's not as wide scale as ISIS and. I don't know.
But I just think that obviously, that's my thoughts. That's religion in general. I find it strange that the SJW movement has aligned itself. So if any movement, surely they'd align themselves more to Buddhism and far more movements that have been associated with, well, I mean, Buddhism had its violent moments, but certainly nothing like,
it's pretty peaceful. Really,
Christianity and Islam.
Yeah.
I still remember, this is a complete difference of tactics, in my opinion, between the religions. With the Taliban, you have suicide bombers. With ISIS, you have these terror beheading videos. With Christianity, you have the lynch mobs and the crucifixions and, tactics like that. Well, I say that, but I say crucifixions. I shouldn't have used, that's more the Romans, but that was terrible. But they did employ burnings, witch burnings, things like that. Other tactics that were equally reprehensible. But
They were bad.
but as I was saying, Buddhism, you'd think that would be the one they allied themselves with in terms of most fitting their agenda. It's actually trans friendly as well. The Buddhists believe that sometimes because the spirits mess up and they put a man's spirit in the body of a woman and they put the soul of a woman in the body of a man. So you'd think they'd naturally ally themselves more with Buddhism, a movement that in the Vietnam...
Yeah, I know.
There's not enough Buddhists, is there?
Too small of a
But in
minority.
Asia, definitely in Asia there's Buddhists, but
Oh,
obviously...
Yeah.
But not in the West.
It doesn't serve the political agenda.
No, but if I just figured...
You are right,
they-
right. But, yeah, in terms
In
of...
Vietnam,
In terms of control, which is all they're after, then...
I mean,
not
what a
cohesive.
difference! I think this is telling. Obviously, like I just said, these Christianity and Islam have used these terror tactics. In the Vietnam War, to protest the war, a monk sat
Yeah.
there and
Burned
just
himself.
torched himself. He didn't kill
You could
anyone
argue
else.
that
It's the front cover of
I mean, I
Rage
know
Against
it's not
the Machine.
technically in
Yeah.
the name of Buddhism, but in Myanmar with the Rohingya Muslims, they're being sort of forced out and treated really badly, and that's why Buddhists.
Sorry, what was that last bit? I didn't miss it.
The Rohingya Muslims in Myanmar.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, they're being I
Yeah,
don't use the word
persecuted.
genocide, but they're being persecuted by Buddhists.
Hmm.
Yeah, that's...
I mean, it's certainly not.
surely. And then are we going to use the classic? Well, that's not real Buddhism because then that'd be unfair.
No.
because-
No. I'm just saying that out of all the religions, I'm not saying Buddhism's perfect by any measure. I just figured that would be the one they'd ally themselves with more so. It's certainly the most friendly towards their ideologies,
Yeah.
but apparently not. They choose the one that's the most immediately beneficial
Yeah,
rather
exactly,
than the one that's
exactly.
most long-term beneficial. But maybe that's just short-sightedness in my opinion.
No,
of
I
the move.
think you're absolutely right.
So, yeah.
Anyway, we'll do one
Oh,
more
we
little.
took a long way from Tommy Robinson. What are your views of Tommy Robinson then, Con? You just don't know much about him. I know me and Tilly are fans.
Racist.
My views on him. I admire anyone who's willing to go out there and seek the truth,
Oh.
even ask the hard
He
questions.
is
Anything
so brave,
like
it's
that,
ridiculous.
I admire.
Oh, he's unbelievably brave. It's critics will say, well, they might say
I'm-
it's
I do employ though a degree of skepticism because I wonder how much, because he has his agenda that he does want to push, and I wonder, how much is he ignoring the wider picture possibly to narrow in on his story, his agenda, that his narrative that he wants to push. What's his motivation?
if it's not genuine, I know you're not sure, but
I don't know. I'd at that point, that's very much only Tommy would truly know that. I think
because I don't believe it's money. Because for literally 10 years of his career, he was a plumber, just doing it voluntarily. Like when he was leader of the EDL, he was making no money off it. It ruined his life. He makes money off it now because he's a journalist and he travels to other countries, and so he should make money off it.
Obviously, my thought, is that any of those old sort of philosophies when he was in the EDL survived? Are they still there at all?
I think he's a bit of a thug. At heart, he's a thug. Like,
So,
I mean, he's a fighter. There's no doubt about it. But I think he's a good man. Like, he's the type of bloke where you wouldn't fancy a fight with him, but you trust him with your kids.
I wouldn't trust anyone with my kids, but
Well, even your parents.
Ooh.
Well, my parents, but I think they count in most
even your wife.
scenarios.
Even your wife, yeah.
It's her kids as well. It's not just they're mine. Go away.
How about like
They don't belong
grandparents?
to you. Okay, you know what I mean, though.
We're getting off
You know what I mean.
I don't know. I mean, I trust Tilly with my kids.
I don't think I
Yeah,
trust Ben with my kids.
Why?
Untrustworthy.
I trust it.
How am I untrustworthy?
I reckon you start bullying my children.
I know I probably would. I do go power crazy very, very quickly.
He just
I
admits
don't
it.
know. I mean, but anyway, as I was saying, obviously, I don't fully know. I've just got a skepticism about the motivations. If he is just someone seeking the truth and his motivation is purely just, look, here's the truth, I want to send it out there, then I applaud that. Obviously, though, I've got to,
What if you
in the
start
same
selling,
way.
Rainforce Extra.
He starts going down the Alex Jones route, starts talking about super male vitality. I've got to employ, keep in mind, I employ similar skepticism. I think you should for everyone. You've got to try, keep at every level a degree of hear them, scrutinize, that's sort of my mentality. I don't dislike Tommy. I admire anyone who's seeking the truth, obviously. So my views at the moment, it's more towards slightly positive, but it's not, because there is that question on my mind of how sincere is it? How much is it, the integrity? But it's more towards slightly, a little more positive slightly, but it's still a little blurry. Don't know how much more I can clarify on it.
Fair enough.
Just like, oh.
Should we move on to our final topic of discussion?
Yeah, let's go.
Yeah.
Okay. So, in the memory of the late great Stephen Hawkins, we thought we'd do a little tribute section, so to just discuss some of the things that he was skeptical of. So here's some video footage with him and Stephen John Oliver.
It's not that difficult to get your head around. Let's talk about artificial intelligence. In a recent op-ed column, you said, and I quote, "Success in creating artificial intelligence would be the biggest event in human history. Unfortunately, it might also be the last." Are you saying that robots are going to destroy humanity? And is that a scientific argument or the pitch for an amazing movie?
Artificial intelligence could be a real danger in the not-too-distant future. It could design improvements to itself and outsmart us all.
I know you're trying to get people to be cautious there, but why should I not be excited about fighting a robot?
You would lose.
Well, okay, for a start, we don't know that, do we? We don't know that for sure, because what could a robot do that I couldn't then fight back with by simply just unplugging him, right?
There's a story that scientists built an intelligent computer. The first question they asked it was, "Is there a God?" The computer replied, "There is now," and a bolt of lightning struck the plug, so it couldn't be turned off.
Holy shit, that's the most terrifying story I've ever heard.
Yes.
Hold on.
Okay, so got a little segment there on artificial intelligence. So what are our opinions on the reaction to Hawking?
Obviously, it's very sad to hear Stephen Hawking's passing. I think he was one of the greatest scientific minds of our generation. You know, his contribution to black hole work. You know, as for we picked this video, obviously, the theory of his... Sorry, I've completely fucked that sentence up. He talks about, obviously, AI and the potential of going rogue. And I think that was, in the later years of his life, definitely a big concern. So what are your thoughts on the idea of Skynet?
I think it is certainly something to be skeptical of, you know. But I think we're still a little bit away from that. So, you know, who knows, by then we might have...
Why would conscious AI be tyrannical, though?
Isn't the nature of life that it sort of demands death, and that if the machine was, you know, built superior than us, you know, wouldn't it obviously want to assume its place at the top of the hierarchy, like we have?
It makes sense.
So would it enslave us or kill us?
Whatever's most beneficial to it.
Surely it'd be beneficial to do neither. Why would it be interested in it? What can be beneficial?
In what sense? The computer's logic, in a cold logic, that it will work.
Like what would be the goal of the computer? And why would it be logical to do any of it?
I've read some theories on like why a computer, if it was to go rogue, the thought process it may go to. It may just decide. There was a story called "I Have No Mouth and I Have to Scream." I don't know if you ever heard of it.
No.
So the idea is, obviously, if the computer gains emotions, it may gain rage and anger, for starters, as one emotion, and hate, especially hate. And even though it's going to be built in a way that it is ultra powerful, it's still the computer in the story. It finds itself limited, that it wants to be God, but it doesn't quite have that much power. So it wipes out humanity except for 5 people who it decides it's going to torture for the rest of time, keeping them alive through its scientific advancements. And it's, you know, it's a really interesting story, really morbid and dark. There was actually a game made on it as well. And I think one of the most famous quotes, and it's the computer talking, and it says, like, "I hate you." If they sketch the word hate onto 1 billionth of an atom cell data, you know, it would not cover even 1% of how much I hate you for what you have done and how much you've limited me. So I think there's, you know, that idea they may hate us as a creator.
Oh, yeah.
There's also, you know, a computer may just think that if it's God, it may determine we are inferior in its image, and that it needs to start fresh to build something ideal in its image. You know, that may be its thought process. I mean, obviously, we're just going now into, you know, but I do think there's the potential of an AI, if it obviously has that kind of power.
How long do you think till it would achieve this then?
To achieve, I mean, again, the difference is that if we just give it sentience, that's different than handing it the keys to the nukes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So if we,
exactly, yeah.
I certainly wouldn't trust an AI, even if we gave it sentience and it was friendly and talking. You know, I certainly wouldn't trust it with military access. You know, it'd be definitely interesting to talk to sentient robots and,
Yeah, definitely.
you know, but I don't,
Could learn
I
so
don't
much.
think,
Could learn so much.
I don't think though, necessarily, you know, we should give them like, let them run our society and things like that. You know, we do have to be, I think, cautious to a degree.
Yeah, I agree.
Any thoughts on that, or do you think I'm totally wrong, or we
No,
should
I
just
think
let
it's
the
right.
computer?
It's just something so hard. Right? It's just something you have to wait and see and be interested
Just
about.
prepare for the worst kind of thing.
I don't know about that. I think it seems a bit Hollywood. I reckon they wouldn't go as far as making them that powerful. Sentient, yeah, and conscious, yeah, but why would they make something conscious and powerful? They make something extremely powerful and something conscious, but I don't see if they need to mix them.
I have a strange theory in my head. The first things we'll try to make when it comes to robotics, like assuming we can get like functional, cybernetic like human, the two things we will make first of all are like construction-based bots, I reckon. Possibly warfare will be another one. Warfare and
guaranteed.
construction. And the other thing, and I think the other thing, aside from construction and warfare, the first immediate thing they'll go for is sex robots.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, obviously.
Immediately.
We're already there, aren't we?
We're getting
okay,
there.
that's something to say about that.
But yeah, I don't know. But that was just a little bit on Stephen Hawking and just obviously one of the things that concerned him. I think that's about everything.
Yeah.
Did you manage to save all this, or because my sudden departure when the CIA kidnapped me?
Yeah, fortunately managed to get you back and to retain everything that you said, so it's no worries.
All right. Okay, I think that's a wrap then.
Okay, well,
Right.
thank you for listening to this week of the Revanchist podcast. Look forward to next week's episode, or whenever it is. Because it's been about 10 days since we did the last one, so are we going to do this one this weekend, or we just see how it goes?
It wasn't 10 days. We did it Sunday last week. It's been 8 days.
Ah, well, yeah. There we are, just over a week. Anyway, it doesn't really matter. Right, okay. Well, thank you for listening. Thanks for tuning in.
Thank you.
And you know, maybe he's not.
For what reason,
Maybe
though?
he's not.
What's his motive behind this narrative if you don't think it's genuine? I'm not saying that you're saying that, but there has to be a motive if it's not genuine. So what's his motive? Hello?
Connor?
Connor, you there? Connor?
He's dead. Tommy Robinson killed him.
CIA on him. Yeah, how about might have to edit that part where I got angry and called that guy hitting people with a stick a regular Muslim.
We're still recording, so we can have this as a blooper.
Blooper reel. Why did you not talk during the site? Why was it me that talked? How did you not notice anything was going on?
Well, I was just waiting for him to respond, because you were directing it at him, and I was thinking he was formulating an answer.
Maybe he still is.
Yeah.
Maybe he still is.
Right.
Maybe he's currently formulating his answer.
It's taking him a while.
What are we gonna do?
Don't know. Just have to wait. Maybe he wanted to play Fortnite early. Called it a day.
I actually reckon he's still formulating his response.
Completely stumped him. Doesn't know how to react. Tommy Robinson.
What was the question again?
There was something along
Oh
the lines
yeah,
of,
it was what's his motive? Wasn't it?
yeah. What's the?
If it's not genuine, what's his motive?
Yeah.
And then he's just stumped by it. Completely like has to reevaluate his life. On the question.
An epiphany. Oh, Connor's back online.
Hang on, I think this is Connor now.
Bomb on Iraq. They didn't consider using it.
The
They
voice
used
of
it
Alex
on our
Jones.
troops in Vietnam. They sprayed PCP on the troops.
That's Connor.
That's not Connor. That's Alex Jones.
Coming back in. It's Connor. He's coming back in and out. Connor. He's talking about spraying PCP on the troops or something. I didn't quite catch it.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yeah.
I have no idea what happened. I just had a crash, I think.
It's fine. We can pick
We
up.
thought you were just
They took me
pondering
out, the
pondering the
CIA.
question.
Yeah.
I just needed a moment. I'm just so stumped.
We can pick up where we
No,
left
That's
where
the
off.
word
was
we
I?
use for you.
Where was I though? Where did I get my opinions on Tommy Robinson?
Yeah.
I said, if he's not genuine, what's his motivation? And then you were stumped.
And that was it. I just so does. I fuck this. He's got me, and he left.